Welcome to another edition of Comics with Cody. Today we're talking about one of my favorite characters in comics. This character was originally known as Captain Marvel, and due to copyright complications later on, they have changed the character's name to Shazam. Of course, that's how he's known today, as Shazam, with the new movie that's come out, and I'll always prefer Captain Marvel. I think it's a shame that the original character using that name can't use that name. But that's, we'll talk about that as we go along. We're gonna get things started with a reprint of the original Wiz Comics #2. This is where Captain Marvel Shazam debuted. Interesting, it's called Wiz Comics #2, but technically there is no #1. The way printing works and the way some factors took place when they were making this, it came out as #2, even though it's basically #1. And I think even when they did #3, they titled it #2. So you've actually got this #2, another #2, which is actually #3, and there's no #1. It gets kind of confusing, but I mean, that's comic books and the numbering system. It's crazy to think these books were just 10 cents back then, and it's really, it's a lot longer than your typical comic. Of course, they were larger back then, this way too. Really, this is just a reprint, of course. One of the original copies of this would be very expensive. I love that they included the original advertising artwork on the back too. This is beautiful, and a full desk for only $1. I love the classic artwork in these. I love the solid colors. I think I kind of miss this in comic books. Modern comics have, it's grown and the art has become so dynamic, but there's some things that I just really find appealing about this original coloring. One thing to think about this too is, even though this is the debut of Captain Marvel, Shazam, his story is only, maybe a third or less of the comic book, because back then, basically you'd have multiple stories in one book. That's why they're longer. And so the Shazam story, the Captain Marvel story, only takes up about a third of the book. Moving on in my collection, this is kind of interesting too. You can find these on Amazon, maybe somewhere else, but Guandanaland is reprinting these books because I think they're basically in the public domain. I'm not exactly sure the legality of how that works, but you can buy these on Amazon, and I've got a few of them. They do print the color version of these books. It can get very pricey, but of course you're getting quite a few of the issues packaged together per volume here. And it's a little confusing too to make sure you get the right ones, because they have a lot of different versions of, I don't know what's going on with the printing over there at Guandanaland on Amazon. But I have the black and white versions, which I still think is really beautiful. And it's just really cool for me because this was a very inexpensive way of getting these books, finding these issues, which can get very complicated with different recollections and volumes and omnibuses. What's the term there? So I bought these in black and white, and this basically is just like volume 1 of the original Wiz Comics. These came out in the 40s. They were published by a company called Fawcett Comics. And of course, he's very similar to Superman. And if you're a comics fan, you know the history of this, but I'll go through it for anybody that doesn't as best I can. Basically, DC was not happy about how close this character resembled Superman. And they had lawsuits with Fawcett Comics that got very complicated. I think Fawcett won for a while, but then eventually Captain Marvel, Shazam, became a DC Comics character, which, there's something sad about that. Of course, Fawcett's no longer publishing. They're out of business. This, again, is a black and white volume. This is the Showcase Presents. How these were published for DC was as cheap black and white volumes of classic comics. A lot of these get pretty expensive now because they were published, I think 2005-ish. And so to find these, they can get a little expensive. This one was not, and the Green Lantern showcases were not terribly expensive when I got those. But this is a cool way to collect this, and just to get to see the change from Fawcett to DC and how they treated the character initially. Moving on, another little side fact is in the UK, they published Captain Marvel, and when Captain Marvel Fawcett closed down, they basically kept publishing them, only they started like making their own, writing their own and illustrating their own, and they called him Marvel Man. But this is basically like a United Kingdom continuation of Captain Marvel. Another fun fact is Captain Marvel Jr. was Elvis Presley's favorite comic book character, and the lightning bolt kind of inspired his whole TCB with the lightning bolt thing. So this is Marvel Man from the UK. I'm really excited to see how this expands upon the character and how they have to change things for legality's sake. But not only did they get Marvel Man, but even after Marvel Man became complicated in litigation or whatever, they had Miracle Man. And this is really interesting because I think everybody from Alan Moore to Neil Gaiman, he has worked on Miracle Man. So it's just really interesting how lawsuits has shaped the history of the Captain Marvel Shazam character and also created new characters along the way. Next up, we're going to talk about the power of Shazam. And this, I'll probably finish off this part one of Captain Marvel with this book. This is Jerry Ordway, who's well known for his run in Superman. But man, what a beautiful book this is. Look at the artwork. They're like paintings, basically. I guess that's what they are. And you get the original graphic novel telling the origin story of Billy Batson, of Shazam, Captain Marvel. And it kind of draws inspiration from Indiana Jones in the beginning, where they're like treasure hunting. And then after that, it goes into the actual issues of the comic book that came out after that. This was one of the most solid Captain Marvel Shazam books that I read. From front to back, this is probably the best version of this character that there is, the best version of his story. I really like this, and I'm sad that there's not more. I need to get book 2 because this is book 1, and I need to get book 2 still. So that's gonna finish it up on part 1, Captain Marvel and Shazam. When we get back in part 2, we'll talk about some of the more recent versions of Shazam, the new 52, and maybe a little bit about the movie. So we'll see you then. Leave a like on this video, comment below what you think of Captain Marvel, what you think of all the legal problems and different versions that have popped up. And we'll see you again next time.